Hey, how's it going, everybody? Scott Spreitzer here with Tony George. We are DocSports.com. Welcome to our six-pack. 3 college football games, 3 NFL games. We're going to talk about all 6 in just one moment. Real quick note, you see that banner at the top of your screen. Get a free $60 account. It means just that. You click on the link below the video. Get yourself set up for that free $60 account if you're not yet a member at DocSports.com. And then you can use the free $60 on any of Tony's daily packages or any of mine over at DocSports.com. Great way to give DocSports a trial run if you haven't done so as of yet. Tony's back in Vegas. A little quick trip over to KC Mo. It was tough to see the Chiefs lose to the Bills for a couple of reasons. That's your team. And, of course, for me, it was a small play over at DocSports.com for me this past weekend. Had a 3-star play on KC, and they came up short. And, the INT late in the game kind of hurt a little bit, but I love that stadium, Tony. 40 years since I've been at Arrowhead, and you still watch a game there. You can see it on TV. I've got other friends who go to KC down from Omaha, and they just talk about how much they love Arrowhead. It's still like a new stadium, and of course the crowd is nutso, but unfortunately came up short last week.
Yeah, and Arrowhead was rocking, and it is a great stadium, a great venue. And, in that game there, Scott, the dynamic of not having Tyreek Hill, you could see. I saw him play the Raiders out here with him last year, and then I went to this game. And when that pocket collapses and Mahomes breaks contain, and he was able to break off on routes and just use his speed to get open, they're missing that a little bit. But, games like that with 2 really good elite teams, those are the 2 best teams in the AFC by far right now. Comes down to 2 or 3 plays, and Buffalo made them and KC didn't. And I'll take the cover and the teaser and with KC in that one and move on. A little bit of a bittersweet game, but I knew it was going to be a tough test. I had Kansas City in the Circa Millions contest, so I was with you on the side. I took the points, so I could see where you're coming from there. But nonetheless, a good time had by all, some good barbecue had by myself personally. And so back here in Sin City and ready to rock and roll with this week's card.
2 places to eat barbecue, and that is Austin, Texas, and KC Mo, no doubt about it. Besides Jesse Ray's out here in Las Vegas, and I got a little interest in that, but we'll talk about that at a different time. But let's talk some college football. We got UNLV at Notre Dame, where the Irish are laying about 25.5. That total up in the high 40s. And Tony, I'll tell you what, UNLV covered their wins total already. They got off to a great start. 4-1 their first 5. They got a real deal at quarterback finally, and Doug Brumfield can beat you with his arms, 70% passer, 8-2 touchdown to INT ratio. He can beat you with his feet. They kicked the crap out of North Texas 58-27 before he got injured. They beat Utah State up in Logan by double digits before he got injured. And the lone loss came at Berkeley by 6 to Cal. So they were clicking along at 4-1, looking like a good chance at maybe a 7 or 8 win season even for a program that has been downtrodden for a long time. And then Brumfield, he gets knocked in the head. He's out due to concussion protocol. In the last couple of weeks against San Jose and Air Force, man, without Brumfield, they just look lifeless on offense. Marcus Arroyo, the head coach, has said as of Wednesday morning that he's listed as day-to-day. If Brumfield can play, it's a completely different team, and you got to prep for a completely different offense.
Yeah, and you and I have been doing this combined 60 years, and I've never seen a team lay in 25.5 that is scoring 22 points a game. And that jumped off the page at me. I can't remember, and I've racked my brain when I've ever seen that. Notre Dame's just not a good football team. At the end of the day, they have a common opponent, as you mentioned, Cal, and UNLV went out there and gave them all they wanted in a 20-14 loss, and that was on the road. And of course, Cal went in Notre Dame and had them by the short and curlies right up until the mid-third quarter before Notre Dame made a couple of big plays, ended up winning by 7 in the last waning moments of the game. And I'm just not big on Notre Dame here at all. I think their offense stinks. I think their coaching's no good. He's going to be one and done if they get 5 or 6 wins this year. Notre Dame's got way too much money and too many good guys out there floating around to let Notre Dame end up being like a Nebraska, And this year the mighty have fallen. Oklahoma, although they had a bounce back win last week, but still, the Nebraskas of the world. Notre Dame's not going to fall into that trap, but I'm not laying 25 with them. And I have just a sneaking suspicion that Brumfield could play, which you want to play at Notre Dame. He's been out 2 weeks. So
Absolutely. Yep.
third week of protocol, he's going to say day to day right up until him and Brumfield will hold hands while they're walking on the airplane to making sure he doesn't trip and fall so they can get him out to South Bend. And if he gets in there, UNLV not only will cover that number, they'll give him a ball game, Scott.
Yeah, I could see, first of all, if Brumfield plays and he's healthy, this line would have been about 20 tops, 19, right in that neighborhood. And so you're talking about an extra 6 points basically with him sidelined. So, and if he does play, Tony, I could see this, this could end up being like a 34-17, 34-20 type of game where Notre Dame wins but doesn't even come close to covering the spread. And I might be shortchanging the Rebels if Brumfield's healthy by saying they'd lose 34-17, 35-20 in that neighborhood. So, but again, if he plays, this is going to be a better ball game that I think the Irish faithful would like to see with UNLV coming to town. But anyway, we're both looking at UNLV if Brumfield plays, and folks, keep an eye on it. I really believe that if he does play, you also got a chance for this total to get over the point spread, over the point total, of like high 40s. I think it could be very well be like a 35-20 type of game if he does play, Tony.
And it's very rare you see somebody favored 25 and a half and the total's 49. I mean, there's just a lot of particulars about this game in terms of, and you and I do one thing. We don't bet into games, we bet into numbers. And we look at numbers all day long, and when they don't make sense, that's when you circle that one. And I had this one circled early. We're going to switch gears, go to the ACC, folks. Clemson Tigers, 13.5-point favorites, total 49.5 against an unbeaten Syracuse. I was on Syracuse last week, as part of an undefeated Saturday last week in college football, Scott. Not giving a lot of respect right now to the Orangemen. And I know Clemson's coming on. By the way, Clemson was my 7-unit winner last week in college football. So 2 teams I won with last week. Curious to know what your thoughts are on this one.
Yeah, it's funny we didn't even talk last week because you were in KC. I swept last Saturday, and my 8-star was Syracuse, and I had a 3-star on Clemson. So we were thinking quite a bit alike last week, obviously, without even talking about the games. And this week, listen, Syracuse won that big game for me, 8-star, like I said last week. But the bottom line was it was as much about the bad spot that NC State was in as it was a play on Syracuse. Not trying to take too much away from the Qs. But you had NC State who had been playing intense battle after intense battle. They were playing like their 7th straight week without time off. They didn't have their starting quarterback. Well, Syracuse had basically had a week off, and I think before that they played like, Little Sisters of the Poor out of Podunk State. And so they basically kind of had like 2 weeks off in a row to get ready, and they took care of business, so that was great. Having said that, they slammed the door on the Wolfpack offense, and Clemson's offense was nothing special last week. They did get us the win. They were up 34-14 on Florida State at one point, ended up winning by 6, covering the spread. But they only gained about 360, 370 yards in that game. The offense still doesn't seem to be clicking. Both teams solid against the run, but Clemson can be had through the air. And I don't trust yet this Clemson offense, as I just said. Last year, talking about a 17-14 game. I do like Garrett Schrader, the quarterback for the Qs. But they're going to look to run the football more than they're going to pass the football. And eventually they'll have to throw because Clemson's pretty darn good against the run. I think this game is going to land under the total, Tony. I don't know if it's going to be 31 like last year's game, but I could very well see this game landing like, 44, 45, something in that neighborhood. And again, right now the total's sitting at 50. So any thoughts on this game before we move on? I'm thinking under here. Not really a lead.
I would have a tendency to agree with you on that. And if it does play that under, that might bring the points into play. The one thing I'll tell you, and you don't hear people talking about him for Heisman, this Shipley for Clemson is all world. I mean, they put him on special teams. He busts open a kickoff for, you had Clemson last week. You were watching the game. He busts one for 30 or 40 yards there. He busts big runs. He catches a ball out of the backfield. This guy can do it all, and he's a big threat, if you don't spy him. And I think this is going to be a slobber knocker. I think you're right. I think you're going to see this one go right down to, third or fourth quarter. And
Mhm.
if somehow Syracuse can get their passing game going here, Scott, they might make it real interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go to the SEC. It's Mississippi State at Alabama, once beaten Alabama. We don't often get to say that, but Bama
Yeah.
laying 3 touchdowns here, about 21 total in the low 60s. And of course, they're off that loss to Tennessee, Tony. But look what it took for a very good Tennessee team to beat Alabama in overtime at home. First of all, you got
Yeah.
the Knoxville crowd. They're nutso. There are 100,000 people in the stands there going crazy. But how about 17 Bama penalties for
Yeah.
170 yards? And before last week's games, Bama would have been about a 14-point neutral site favorite power rating wise over Mississippi State, Tony. But as usual, the tickets have poured in on Bama. You got to pay a premium if you want to play Bama, especially coming up a loss now back home. Over 90% of the tickets thus far at a couple of the books that I checked in with are on the Tide. 90% of the bets on the Alabama Crimson Tide. One joint said 93% of their tickets are in Alabama. So you're paying a premium. But I will say this, it took Alabama to self-destruct with those penalties and a lack of discipline, and still they only lost by 3 at a good Tennessee club. What are your thoughts this week? Did the Tide bounce back?
Well, and I don't know. This is a unique position for the Crimson Tide. It really is coming off a loss. The good news is they're back home. At least they're not on
Sure.
back-to-back roadies here. That helps. The number's 21, 60 and a half is the total here. Um, at the end of the day here, I'm not going to be willing to lay 21 with them, but I will give you a two-word pick over 60 and a half. You take a look at this yards gained combined. This is season averages. These two combined offensively, 871 yards a game. Defense allowed 929 yards. And Alabama's going to score every time that they get a chance to, right till the very last second off a loss. And the one thing I think they're going to have a lot of success with here is running the football against Mississippi State here. Mike Leach will have a game plan. He gives people fits in big games. He always has his entire career. He never closes them out, but he gives them fits. But I really like the fact that they can run here all day long against the nation's 81st ranked run defense, giving up almost 160 yards a game. And of course, Bama putting up 237 on the ground, Scott, and Bryce Young is mobile, which is also
Sure.
going to give Mississippi State. So I can easily see Alabama having over 40 points here. And we've seen people torch the two good teams that Bama played, Scott, that torched them through the air was Texas and Tennessee. They torched them. They torched their secondary. And I
And a
think
bunch of
Mississippi,
penalties committed by Alabama, not in just the Tennessee game, but against Texas also, double-digit
yeah,
penalties. I mean, same thing. They had a hard time covering the receivers.
yeah. And so I think you're going to see Mississippi State put up 28 here. And I think you can easily see Bama having 40. And when that
Right.
run game gets going, that opens up, they got to come up and be honest on defense. That opens up the play action pass. And Bama's got the guys that can run down the field and make the big plays, the 35, 40-yard catches, and bust the thing wide open. Then you got Leach not trying to run it. He's just chucking it 68 times a game. So I do like the over 60 and a half in this one. Let's switch gears and go to the Ravens and the Browns in the NFL, Scott. And of course, the Ravens they just collapsed, it seems, in the fourth quarter. In the second half of a lot of their games this year, taking on a Browns team who, quite frankly, defensively were way overrated going into the season, in my opinion. And it's just not clicking for the Browns right now. Ravens 6.5, total 46, Scott.
Yeah, I think all those close, hard-fought, and intense games for Cleveland finally added up last week in that ugly loss to New England. They turned the ball over 4 times, Cleveland. Meanwhile, Baltimore outgained the Giants by a buck 70, 170 yards, but still
Yeah.
lost that game to New York by 4 points. Baltimore averaged 70 yards per play in that game, but Lamar's interception did them in. Cleveland's got to find a run defense. They were shredded on the ground by the
Oh,
Falcons. They were shredded on the
yeah.
ground, a couple of times this season already. including the Chargers too, by the way, before the Patriots lost. And then, of course, Bailey Zappi took him apart with that New England passing game, did a great job himself. Both defenses, Tony, in these two teams, Browns and Ravens, leave a whole lot to be desired. And I think the game's going to go over 46. I don't think you're going to see Cleveland held in check again unless they turn the ball over a lot again. But if they do, then, at least a couple of those times will probably end up in short field situations for the Baltimore offense. Either way, I think the teams combined to go over that total of 46.
Oh, I would have, you know what? The Ravens defense hasn't done anything special all year long. And, Cleveland's
Right.
going to run it crazy on them all day long.
Nick Chubb. Jets at Broncos. Listen, I had Russell Wilson. I had to go through that on Monday night to pick up the win, and it made the difference between a winning and a losing week at the Circa and at the Westgate for me. End up 3-2. So I am happy with Russell, even though his home fans aren't in Denver, even though they lost the game outright. They got the cover. That's all I cared about. Now they're back home. They're hosting the Jets. Short favorite Denver, total just under 40. And that Jets, of course, the surprise win last week, 17-point winner over Green Bay, while Denver again covered in OT against the Chargers. All we've seen and heard, Tony, about Russell Wilson has been bad stuff, obviously. He can't get in rhythm with this offense. It's a new offense. Nathaniel Hackett's not quite on the same page as his offensive players or his quarterback. But yet his quarterback rating, it's about 10 points higher than Zach Wilson's, believe it or not. And as bad as things have gone for Denver, Tony, they are a 1-point loss to Seattle, a 3-point overtime loss to Indy, and a 3-point overtime loss to the Chargers from a 5-1 record. Your thoughts on this one?
Give me Denver all day long. Give me Denver all day long. Better quarterback at home, better defense at home. The Jets, let's see, last 2 weeks, Miami and Green Bay. And you're going back to Lambeau and now to Mile High against a pissed off Broncos team that has a really talented quarterback. I think they've got a really bad play calling head coach. They're not able to, I guess, call a game where they can exploit Russell Wilson's strengths. And that's going to have to change, or somebody's going to be out of a job, and it's not going to be Russell Wilson. But I think the Jets come back down this week in this ball game. And now it's down to -0.5 point. So at day's end, I like the Broncos at home here. Let's finish it up. Now, Scott, try and make a selection in this game without pissing me off.
Was that SFO? What did that say?
Yeah, it was a long trip home on Monday. And by the way, when I get to the airport Monday night and go to my gate, the entire Southwest Airlines area was completely full of Bills fans. And I was wearing my KC gear, and it was a little rough. The Bills Mafia was still out in full force. And apparently they'd been down to Power and Light District juice it up for the ride home. So nonetheless, Kansas City on the road laying 3 at San Fran, total 48.5. And boy, my only loss last week in the NFL was San Francisco. Atlanta, without Cordell Patterson, made their defense look like they didn't know what the hell they were doing. And they spent all week in West Virginia kind of isolated practicing for that game after they played out east the week before. So I was a little shocked at that. What's your thoughts on this one here? Super Bowl from a couple of years ago.
And they had done really well under Shanahan when they stayed in a certain area of the country after a week prior to that until this last week. But, they held the Falcons to 289 total yards. But turnovers did San Francisco in. And I was looking at their 3 losses so far this season. Those 3 losses, they've committed 8 turnovers. They shoot themselves quite a bit. They were at it again in Atlanta. They turned it over 3 times. Their defense has kept them in a couple of games and will likely have to do so again on Sunday. The Niners do own the better defensive numbers between these two teams, but the 2 teams that beat KC slammed the door of the Chiefs' ground game and then held the offense in check. And I do believe the Niners can slow the KC offense down. And because of that, I like the under in this one. KC's offense is not a balanced attack right now. They're 4th through the air, not bad, but they're 20th on the ground. And they missed that guy who can stretch those opposing defenses, who's now exchanging pool tables in Miami, or ping pong tables, I guess it were last week. But I'm not thrilled with the San Francisco offense. So they should do their job, the offense, in helping keep this one under the posted total, Tony. That's what I'm doing with this game. KC and the Niners under. It's around 48.5 or so, and I think it'll be a little bit lower scoring than that.
Well, I appreciate you staying off the side, just so you and I can still be friends. Of course, we're fans of Kansas City, we're fans of Nebraska, but we're first to fade them if we think there's an opportunity. And I think the number's about right. It'll be interesting to see how this goes down. I wanted to let everybody know. Be sure and get over to Docs with the NBA starting, obviously college basketball in a couple of weeks, but we're on a hell of a run in football right now, folks. And then we're going to have a 7-unit NFL play, which is very rare for me. I'm on an 11-4 run in the NFL, and we have a 6-unit top play on Saturday in college football. We're on a 19-5 run there in top picks dating back to last week. And of course, off an unbeaten Saturday last week and a 6-2 week overall. Take advantage of that $60. You're watching a sports handicapping video. Why? Well, I know that Scott and I are good looking. We have magnetic charm and charisma. We're extremely engaging. I mean, we're probably the best media guys in the business without question, but you're actually here to make money. And if you want to make some money this weekend, get over to Docs and take advantage of that free $60 and pick up one of Scott's cards, pick up one of my cards, and, fatten the wallet a little bit and get a little added money for some NBA bets upcoming here, folks. That's for sure.
Brad Pitt, eat your heart out. That's all he's trying to say right now.
That's right, anyway, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I start off with just a couple of plays here and there in the NBA, but last year from start to finish, right through the NBA Finals, 111-74. Which is 60% basically on the nose, and we gained over $13,000 and had a free play opening night, not a premium, but a free play on the Celtics, and they were able to come through with a strong fourth quarter. But as far as football, man, it's we're just like a tenth or two of a point underneath 67% on the season, like 66.5, something like that. And that's college and pro combined. It's been one of those years. There's been 8 weeks of college and pro football combined, if you go back to week 0 in college, and we're 7-1 winning weeks, 7-1 with high-end plays in college, 7-star going this week in college after that 8-star winner last week with the Qs. Of course, we'll have the NFL. And Tony, right now, I don't like to look at standings too early, but I was looking at Westgate for the heck of it and Circa, and sitting at 2 points out of first place at the Westgate and like 2.5 points out at Circa. So if you can hear that, knocking on wood. And hoping to keep it going because we're kind of in the mix right now. But just like Tony, swept last Saturday. Man, it was a nice day. Boy, I like those days when you're not sweating too much. And then I was doing a show in a book on Saturday night, and I had one play to go for the sweep. It was Clemson, started out slow. They get out to a 20-point lead. Even though they gave up those last 2 touchdowns, it was late, and you felt good about Clemson. That's a nice way to wrap up a day when you're doing a show, and you got to – there's been times when I've been like, oh, crap, I got to win a game to not have a bad losing day or a winless day and at the old Stardust. And then, of course, another hotel since then. And it's much easier when you got a winning day wrapped up when you're doing a show at a sports book. But check it out, folks, and check out that $60 free account. It's a great way to give DocSports.com a trial run. He's Tony George. I'm Scott Spreitzer. You know what to do. Let's put him in the win column, everybody.